In my opinion, chefs that don't use actual versus theoretical are just behind the 8 ball. Now this report's going to be a game changer. You're a chef and you're running a business. You're probably watching this video because you don't want to work a 9 to 5. You don't want to sit behind a desk all day. You don't want to read reports. But here's the thing. You're a chef and you're running a business. So there are reports and statistics that you have to look at. In today's video, we're going to be talking about AvT, or actual versus theoretical. Now this report's going to be a game changer. I'm telling you right now, if you know and understand this information, you're going to be the person in your kitchen that's the authority figure. You're going to be putting on a white coat and have everyone going to you for knowledge and information. That's what you want. You want to be looked up to as the leader, as the boss. You want to gain the respect of your colleagues and your subordinates. Well, this is a blueprint for understanding actual versus theoretical, which is a tool used for inventory. Now, if you're brand new to management, you might not have seen actual versus theoretical before, but I promise this report is a game changer. So this video might be a little bit longer than some of my other ones, but we're really going to dig into this topic. And when you're done watching this video, you will be the subject matter expert on actual versus theoretical. My goal in making this video is to make it very, very easy to understand, even though it's kind of a difficult and complicated process. So what is actual versus theoretical? Well, actual versus theoretical is a report that lets you know the variance in the product that you have on the shelves after inventory. Now, some chefs only focus on food costs as a percentage, but if you incorporate actual versus theoretical, you're going to get a leg up. With actual versus theoretical, you actually control all of the factors, whereas food cost you don't. Think about it. A couple months ago, crab was $40 a pound because there's a shortage in the market. A chef can't control that. So because there's a shortage in the market, the food cost is actually going to go up. With actual versus theoretical, you can actually control all the factors. So when you're looking at actual and theoretical, what the actual is the actual amount of food that was subtracted from your inventory during a given period. With theoretical, it is the amount that should be missing from your inventory after a given period. So let's dig into this a little bit deeper so we can further understand. Every restaurant has a period that they do their inventory. It could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a quarter. Whatever it is, it's important that when we do our inventory, we have accurate counts. If we do not have accurate counts for our inventories, then we're not going to have a good number for our AvT and it's not going to be accurate. If you do not do accurate counts, then your AvT is going to be thrown off. And the purpose of the actual versus theoretical is to actually get the information from the report so that we can impact our business. Now, when our actual versus theoretical report is published, we're either going to see a loss in product or a growth in product. Now, a lot of chefs out there think that a growth is actually a good thing, but it's not. Now, when we see growth in product, that could happen because of one or two things. Either A, we're not giving the guests what they're paying for and we're actually giving them less food, or B, we're not giving them the correct ingredients in their dish, which means our food is not consistent. So a growth is just as bad as a loss, even though a growth technically improves our financial results. So let me give you a very basic example of actual versus theoretical before we look at an actual report. So let's say at the end of our previous inventory, we had 10 apples left over. Throughout our period, we ordered 5 more apples. So from that period, we should have 15 apples total on the shelf. Let's say throughout our period, we sold 8 apples. Well, 8's going to be your theoretical because that's technically the correct amount that should be missing from our inventory when we do our count. So let's say when we do our next inventory, we only have 3 apples. So your actual is going to be 8 plus the 4 apples that you're missing, because that's the actual amount that was subtracted from your inventory. So your actual is going to be 12. So to get your answer, you take your theoretical and you subtract your actual. So we're taking 8 minus 12, which results in our variance of -4. So looping back, we can actually control the loss in our product. Let me give you one more example of actual versus theoretical using apples again. So let's say we have 10 apples again from our previous inventory. So we're starting with 10 apples, and again, throughout our period, we're gonna order 5 more apples. That gives us a total of 15 apples. Now, let's say again, we sell 8 apples. So we should be missing only 8 apples when we do our next inventory. But let's say that this time we count our inventory and we have 10 on the shelf. 8 is gonna be our theoretical because that is the amount of apples that should be missing from our inventory. But because we have 10 on the shelves, our actual is only going to be 5 apples because we're only missing 5 apples. So that's actually going to give us a growth of 3. So now that we have a better understanding of actual versus theoretical, let's look at the timeline of our food, and from there we can figure out where we can actually impact our financial results based on what we're either missing or growing. So the first thing that's going to happen is food's going to come in on a truck. From there, somebody will take the food and they'll put it on the shelves. After the food's on a shelf and put away, the prep cooks are going to take the food and they're going to prep what they need and they're going to put it in the cooler to be line ready. Once the food is line ready, the line cooks are going to come grab the food, they're going to cook it, and then they're going to send it out to the guests to eat. So as you can see, so many different hands are touching the food and moving the food around. So what we need to do is use our actual versus theoretical information and go through these steps to figure out where we're missing or gaining our product. So let's look at an example of ground beef. Let's say ground beef comes into our restaurant on the truck. The first thing I'm going to do as a chef is weigh the beef to make sure that they're not shorting me on the delivery. Once I know that I have the proper amount of beef coming into my restaurant, I'm going to put it on the shelf. But I want to make sure that everything is properly rotated and properly labeled. If things are not getting properly rotated and labeled, it's possible that you have waste on your shelves. We've all heard the term FIFO, or first in, first out. What that means is that if we put new product in front of old product, the product in the back is going to get moldy or expired, and we're going to be forced to throw it away, causing waste. So I'm going to make sure my rotation is good, that way I'm not missing my ground beef. Once I know my coolers are squared away, I'm going to let the prep cooks take the ground beef and prep it. Now, the prep cooks might be prepping burgers for dinner, so I'm going to make sure I'm weighing the burgers and make sure that they're the proper weight. If they're underweight, then I'm going to be growing beef. But if they're overweight, I'm actually going to be losing beef. So I want to make sure that they're perfect. So if I'm monitoring ground beef, anytime I see beef out, I'm going to ask my prep cooks what they're making, and I'm going to do a side-by-side with them, and I'm going to be making sure that they're weighing out their product when they use it. Now step 4 when the prep cooks are done is that it's going to go back in the cooler. Again, now that it's prepped, I want to make sure that the prep product is labeled correctly and still being rotated. I also want to make sure at this step that I'm not over or under prepping product, because this could also cause waste. Once it's in the cooler, it's going to be line ready, and the line cooks are going to come back to the cooler, take the product up to the line, and start prepping it for service. So if I'm following this timeline, I'm going to go up to the line next, and I'm going to be making sure that everything with beef on the line is perfect. I'm going to be doing spot weights of my burgers to make sure that they're still the correct weight. Anything with beef that's prepped, I'm going to make sure it has the correct ladle. Now, during service, I'm going to be on Expo. I'm going to be watching every single plate that leaves the kitchen. If there's a chili or something with prep ground beef, I'm going to be looking at the chili and making sure that it's not over or under portioned. If it looks wrong to me, I'm going to go back to the cook and I'm going to be making sure that they're making it the correct way. I'm also going to be keeping an eye on my broil cook, making sure that he's not burning burgers and throwing them away. If we're missing product, I want to know about it. So for them to be burning burgers and throwing it away and not telling me, that would be a problem. So I'm going to be living and breathing ground beef until I find out where my variance is going. Now, looking at our timeline, we actually have 6 steps. So the 6th step is that it actually goes out to the guest. Now, most people think that it's actually done at step 5 when it's on the line, but that's not correct. When it goes out to the guest and they don't want the food, we need to understand the difference between a void and a comp. Now, I'm going to have a separate video on this topic coming out shortly. But if we don't understand a void or a comp, we might have variance in our actual versus theoretical because we're comping it the wrong way. So not understanding the difference between a void and a comp can actually throw off our actual versus theoretical. If the kitchen actually preps the food and makes the food, then it needs to be comped. When we comp our food, the items remain out of inventory. So our actual versus theoretical will be correct. When we're voiding food, it's like we're taking the food and putting it back on the shelves. So we void when the kitchen actually doesn't start the food. Like I said, I'm going to be making another video breaking this down into more detail, but that's just a small summary of what a difference between a comp and a void is. Now, a question you might have is about yields. This is another topic I'm going to have to make a video on because it really goes into the costing of the recipes. But let's say you have an entire primal of ribeye. When that primal comes in, you're going to have to cut off the fat lip, right? So that's going to be immediate waste. So there is a way to deal with that, and I'm going to kind of break that down into how that's going to impact your AvT on a different video. But just do your best to make sure that you're not wasting anything. If you have a bar and you're peeling lemons at the bar, don't just throw away the lemons because they're peeled. Make sure that it's going back to the line to be juiced or to be used as wedges. Whatever the product is, just be smart about it. You want to make sure that you're using every little bit of product you can, because that will be the best way to impact your food costs and your actual versus theoretical. So let's pull up an actual example of actual versus theoretical. So let's go down to blue cheese crumbles. I think that's going to be a good example. Now, this is a very good report of what an actual versus theoretical is actually going to look like in a live restaurant. So the left side of this report is going to be breaking our actual versus theoretical down by our taking unit. So it's going to be pounds, ounces, volume, weight, that sort of thing. If you go to the right side, it's going to give you the same information, but it's going to be based on financial numbers and dollar amounts. Both are great tools, and I'm going to show you how to use it right now. So looking at the left, it breaks it down to category. So we're looking at blue cheese crumbles under dairy. Now you'll notice that blue cheese crumbles is actually in blue. Most softwares are advanced enough to where if you click it and open it up, it'll give you more information on blue cheese crumbles, such as what recipes in your restaurant actually have blue cheese crumbles, which gives you a good idea of where to look. Next line over says count UOM. That is unit of measurement, and LB stands for pounds. So our blue cheese crumbles is actually inventoried in pounds. So if I were doing inventory and I was counting this by ounces, that would throw off the results. So unit of measure needs to be consistent when you're doing your inventory. Next line over is unit cost. What that means is that it costs $2.96 for every pound of blue cheese that the restaurant sold. Next line over is begin. It says 25. So the beginning number is the amount of blue cheese that you started on your previous inventory count. So that's the amount of blue cheese that was on your shelves when you started the period. Next line over, it says purchase 40. That means throughout the period there was 40 pounds of blue cheese purchased. Transfer, it says 0. What transfer is when you're near another restaurant and you borrow product from them. If we go across the street and borrow blue cheese, we're not actually paying for that blue cheese, but we're going to put it in under a transfer. That way it's still accounted for and we have accurate results in our inventory. Next line over, it says end 17.5. That is the amount of blue cheese that you counted today on your inventory. So again, let's say it's Monday, we're doing inventory. That is the amount of blue cheese that's on your shelf during this inventory. Next line over says actual 47.5. That is the amount of blue cheese that is actually missing from your inventory this period. Theoretical 19.99. That means you should have only used 19.99 pounds of blue cheese this period. So the next line over is going to show you your variance. For blue cheese crumbles, we're looking at 27.51 pounds of blue cheese for our variance. That means we are missing 27.51 pounds of blue cheese. So that number is generated if you take 19.99 and subtract 47.55. That is the amount of blue cheese that you are missing. Now this report does show growth in red, which is a little bit confusing because typically people associate loss with red, but this report actually has growth in red. That's why it's in parentheses. So if you go to the right side of the report, it'll give you the financial breakdown, but we're actually missing $76.98 in blue cheese. So as a chef, that's a pretty big deal, and I want to know exactly where that blue cheese is going. So the first thing I would do as a chef is I would go back and make sure that I have the correct count of blue cheese on the shelves. I'm going to reweigh all the blue cheese in the restaurant, and I'm going to see if that actually changes my ending number. If I can get 17.5 up because of the amount of blue cheese that I have on the shelves, that's actually going to help my food cost. So that's the first place I'm going to look. So from there, I'm going to go back to my timeline, and I'm going to look at blue cheese as it goes through my restaurant, and I'm going to figure out everyone that puts their hands on that blue cheese. That way I can go back and coach and teach the correct people to make sure that my variance is minimized for the next inventory period. So step one, I'm going to make sure that our vendor drops off the correct amount of blue cheese. I don't want to sign an invoice when I don't actually receive blue cheese, because if the vendor never actually drops off the blue cheese and I sign an invoice saying it's okay, then theoretically I should have that blue cheese on the shelf when I really don't. So I want to make sure that I am actually receiving the product that I signed for. Step two, I'm going to put it on a shelf, make sure it's rotated in the correct spot. That way it's easier to inventory and the prep cooks know exactly where it is and not going to be going bad. Step three, prep cooks. If I have a variance like that, I'm going to be doing side-by-sides with my prep cooks. I'm going to be making sure that they're focusing on blue cheese. I don't want to see any waste. I'm going to make sure that they have the scales out whenever they're using blue cheese, weighing every item with blue cheese, make sure everything is portioned correctly, and I'm going to be all over them throughout the next period. Step four, the food goes back in the cooler. I'm going to be making sure my product's rotated, labeled, everything's perfect, nice and clean, organized, easy for people to find. I'm going to be making sure that all of my product has lids on it and they're put down tight, that way there's no spillage. I'm going to be doing everything I can do to make sure that my blue cheese is being taken care of. Step five, I'm following this blue cheese back to the line. Everything with blue cheese, I'm going to be all over. I'm going to be all over my salad cook to make sure that the blue cheese dressing has the correct label in it, to make sure that the pans are getting rotated, nothing's getting frozen at the bottom. I'm going to be making sure that blue cheese crumbles has the correct scoops. Whatever I use blue cheese for, I'm going to be making sure it's portioned on the line and the quality control on Expo is on point. Step six, I'm going to be watching my comps and my voids. I'm going to be making sure I'm doing the right thing. That way it'll positively impact my AvT and give me actual accurate results. That way I can go back and teach and coach my staff. As you can see, you can do everything in your power to make sure that you're not having waste or growth in your restaurant. Actual versus theoretical gives you actual information that you can go back and impact your restaurant on. It's much more detailed than just looking at food costs as a percentage. That's why it's very important to use these tools. In my opinion, chefs that don't use actual versus theoretical are just behind the eight ball. My expectation of you is to use this tool and to discipline yourself to actually look at the results and go back and impact your restaurant food cost through your actual versus theoretical. The more things we can go back and improve and make perfect in our kitchen, the easier life is going to be and the easier going through our actual versus theoretical is going to be. Put in the hard work now and you will see the results on your actual versus theoretical. Now, when you're done going through your actual versus theoretical, what you need to do is send communication to your team. Again, another video is coming out shortly with communication, but you need to pair this video up with the communication video. So once you get the results from your actual versus theoretical, you're going to communicate it to the rest of your team. Now, this is done through proper communication. You want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. That way you get the best results.